I cleared my certified Kubernetes application developer exam, and in this video, I will share with you tips and advices to clear your CKAD exam. This video is going to be very informative for people appearing for CKAD exam, so make sure you watch it till the end. Let's start. To help you pass your CKAD exam, I have this document created which has all the information you will need to pass your certified Kubernetes application developer exam. This document includes information about the exams, key concepts you should know, tips and advice you should follow to pass your exam, and also real exam questions that I got in my CKAD exam. It also includes free resources you could follow to prepare for your exam and lot more. If you want me to share this document, comment down CKAD exam in the comment section. Now, before we dive into all these different topics, let's take a quick look on CKAD exam. So CKAD stands for Certified Kubernetes Application Developer Exam, and it proves your Kubernetes and cloud native developer skills. You might already know all of this, so I'm not going to waste time explaining that. But if you want to know what topics or domains are covered in the exam, here is the list of domains and competencies in the exam. Although if you look here, application deployment, which is asking you to know the knowledge of Helm package and customize, I didn't got any questions about Helm or customize in my exam. I sat it for twice because I failed my first attempt, and I did the exam the second attempt yesterday where I passed. This is my certification if you want to verify. So I didn't got any questions about Helm or customize, but there were questions about pod design, configuration, which I have listed down in this documentation here. So there were questions on pod design. For example, create a pod with this name, having this image, having this particular labels and stuff. There were also questions on deployments to create deployments with 5 replicas, having this setting, also an environment variable or secrets, config maps added to it. Which is why you also need to have information about config maps, how to create them using imperative command. Also know what are different settings inside the manifest files. So you need to know config map secrets. Also need to know how to set limits for the pod. So a pod should have CPU of this range and memory of this limit or request. You also need to know how to get limit ranges for namespaces. And this question is also solved in the previous video of CKAD exam questions. I hope you have watched it. If not, you can check out the video. The link is also there in the documentation, and I'll paste it here. Along with this, you will also need to know what are service accounts, how to create them, how to give different roles and bind that roles to service accounts. Also, what is environment variable, how to set them, how to set config maps or secrets as environment variable is something you need to know. There was also questions on sidecars. So you need to create a pod manifest having 2 containers. One is the main container, second one for login, which was a sidecar pattern. You also need to know how communication happens between them. These are some concepts you need to know along with observability. You need to know what are probes, readiness probe, liveness probe, startup probe, how to implement them. There was a question to set up readiness probe on a particular path, HTTP path. So you need to know what are probes and how to use them. You also need to know how to check the resources such as CPU and memory for a pod along with logs. There will be a question in the exam to check the pod with highest CPU, or maybe a question to check the logs for a particular pod. So you need to know what are different commands to that. And again, I have already created videos on different or important Kubernetes commands. So these commands will help you understand most of these concepts. Along with observability, you also need to know services and networking. This is something which is very, very important, and people usually get confused or get questions wrong on these topics. So you need to know what are network policies, how can you use different network policies on a pod, what are ingress, how to troubleshoot or set up ingress for communication, what are different services, node, port, cluster IP, load balancer, how do you expose a deployment on a pod using services is something you need to know before you sit for the exam. Next, there might be a question on volumes or persistent volume claim. I didn't find any question, but there was a question specific to config maps and secrets where you need to create a config map and attach that config map as a volume mount on the pod. So this is again something you need to know. Next important thing is labels and selectors. You need to know how to add labels to a particular pod or a deployment, how selectors work, how labels work, how they communicate with each other. This is important because you might get a question where you need to troubleshoot why a service is not able to talk to deployment. Then it might be because of selectors are wrong or labels are wrong. So this is why you need to know labels and selectors as well. There was also a question on cron job. You need to know how to create a cron job with particular settings like this cron job should be completed in this particular time range. Maximum successful jobs should be 2, failed jobs should be 3, something like that. So this is why you need to know how to create cron jobs, how to create jobs from it, and how to execute them at least once. I have also included that in my most asked question. You can see there will be a question here, creating a cron job with specific settings and executing it each one. And this is also covered inside this video. If you follow the videos that I have on my channel, you will definitely pass your CKAD exam on the first attempt. Along with this, it is very important for you to have good understanding, good experience with Vim and Nano. These are two text editors in Linux. Whenever you will get a question to edit a manifest file, it will always open a Vim editor. So you need to know how to edit things in Vim, different shortcuts, how to edit a file, and how to save that file using Vim, how to exit from Vim as well. Along with this, get good hands-on on Kubernetes imperative command. Follow this video thoroughly. You also have access to Kubernetes documentation in the exam. You should be very familiar with the documentation. Make sure to know which documentation to refer for a particular question, and that will help you a lot in the exam. As I said, there was no question on help and customize. You might get a question, but I didn't got any questions. And according to the forums I read, there was no question for other people as well. Now that you know all the different concepts you need to know to sit for this exam, let's look at real CKAD exam questions that I got in my CKAD exam. So I got questions on these different topics. The first one was candidate deployment. So there were two deployments you need to create and then distinguish the traffic 60% to first deployment, 40% to another. Then I also got questions on network policies. So there were many different network policies, and the question was asking to attach to a particular network policy on the pod, and you could do this using labels. Then you also had a question on ingress. So there was a path where you need to access the deployment and you need to troubleshoot why is it not able to access it. I also had questions on service account. So there was a service account in particular namespace which was not able to access pods, and to do this you have to create roles and role bindings. Then there was an easy question on how to create a Docker image from a file and also save that into a tar format, which I have covered in this particular video, so you can see how to solve that particular question. There was also a question on readiness, as I said. So you need to set a readiness probe. 2-3 questions on things to set resource limits and requests on pods and deployments. Next, I also had questions on security context to set user ID as 1000. There was also a question on deprecated APIs. So there was a manifest which was using previous version of the API version. You need to make it to use the latest version, which is app/v1 for a deployment. If you want me to show how to do this, I can create another video which will cover all these different questions as well. There was also a question on deployment strategy, rolling update deployment to set max search and max unavailable for a particular deployment, editing, creating, and rolling back deployments. Also how to assign service account, creating a cron job with specific settings, again explained in these questions. Now that you know all the different exam questions I got, and before I end this video, I have some tips for you to pass your CKAD exam. So you know Kubernetes exams are so costly and you cannot afford failing them, and this is why I make sure to go through these tips very thoroughly so you don't fail your exam. The first tip I have for you is familiarize yourself with documentation. In the exam, you're given access to Kubernetes documentation and you need to know which documentation to follow for a particular solution or for a particular question, and you can do this only by practicing. So make sure you get familiar with all the different Kubernetes documentation for different questions. Second is master kubectl commands. You need to know what are different commands. You also need to know the imperative commands. So make sure you follow this video where I've explained important Kubernetes commands. Imperative commands will help you save a lot of time. You don't need to write the manifest file yourself. You can use imperative commands, and I've explained that in the commands video. Next is to read questions properly. Questions in the Kubernetes exams are very tricky. You might be confused at first on what is the question expecting you to do. So make sure to read the questions properly before you sit for the exam, and always solve the easy questions first before you go to the difficult questions. You can always mark the questions as a review and then come back again at the end of the exam when you have some time to solve those difficult questions. Next tip to save your time is to use Control F. Rather than going through the documentation completely to find something, you can always use the Control F option. In the exam, the browser will be Firefox, not Google Chrome. So you will find the search option below. So in Firefox, if you search for something, the search box appear here. And this is what you will get in your exam environment as well. So you can directly search for, let's say you want to search for request. I can search here and go to the next iteration of request. So rather than typing things myself, I can simply copy and paste from here. So let's say I want to set CPU limits and request. I can just copy here and paste it in my manifest, edit it using Vim and editor. So this is why you also need to have knowledge of how to use Vim and Nano editor. Lastly, the only tip for you is practice, practice, practice. Practice as much as you can. You can use Killer Coda or any online labs to practice. Here are free resources. So these are all the things I wanted you to know before you sit for the exam, and this is how I passed my exam. For resources, I used the practice test in the Killer SH and also followed this exercises on GitHub. For you, you can also use the paid options. So this was the video on how I passed my CKAD exam. I hope the information shared in this video will be helpful for you and will help you pass your CKAD exam as well. So all the best. Thank you and have a good day.